الله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور انفسنا ومن سيئات اعمالنا انه من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له واشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد ان محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى اله واصحابه اجمعين ومن تبعهم باحسان الى يوم الدين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد عباد الله فإن أحسن الحديث كتاب الله وأحسن الهدي هدي نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة. I praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as He should be praised. And I bear witness that there is no true deity worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that His Prophet Mohamed sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is His final and last messenger. O you who believe, have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Protect yourself from the wrath and anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fear Him as He should be feared. And do not die except in a state of Islam, in a state of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. O you who believe, have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say the truth. If you do so, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will correct and rectify your actions. And whoever obeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His messenger, then he has already attained the ultimate success. Your brothers and sisters, in Islam, the best of guidance is the guidance of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the best of speech is the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the worst of matters are newly innovated matters in this religion. Because whatever is newly innovated in this religion will lead you astray. And whatever will lead you astray, whatever will lead you off the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will lead you to the hellfire. Dear brothers in Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His messenger quite often would sometimes, in order to drive a point through or send a message to us, would give a parable, an example to us, whether in the Quran or the Sunnah, in order to clarify a concept for us. Today, inshallah, I want to share one of those things that the Prophet ﷺ, it's a parable that he gave. And this is narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. And as mentioned in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. The one in Muslim is an Jabir ibn Abdullah. The one in Sahih Bukhari is an Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. So they both narrated it. And the hadith, as the words of Abu Hurairah mentioned, he said, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إنما مثلي ومثل الناس كمثل رجل استوقد نارا فلما أضاءت ما حوله جعل الفراش والدواب التي يقعن فيها. The Prophet said, إنما مثلي, verily my example, and the example of the people, الناس. كمثل رجل is the example of a man. He lit up a fire, a bonfire. He lit up a fire. فجعل الفراش والهوام التي يقع فيها يقعن فيها. فجعل يحجزهن ويغلبنه فيقعن فيها. فأنا آخذ بحجزكم عن النار وأنتم تقعون فيها وأنتم تقتحمون فيها. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying that I am me, and my example, the example of the people, is like a person who has lit up a fire. And then you have these moths and insects that are drawn to that fire. And he, the person who has lit it, is trying to prevent, he's trying to grab hold of these moths from falling into that fire. And they are struggling against him. And they beat him and they fall into that fire. And so the Prophet said, فَأَنَا آخِذٌ بِحُجَزِكُمْ. So the Prophet said, I am holding on to hujaz. Your hujaz is that midsection area of the izar, the lower garment where you tie something. The Prophet is saying, I'm trying to hold to that from you, trying to grab you. وَأَنْتُمْ تَقْتَحِمُونَ النَّارِ. And you are تَقْتَحِمُونَ. It was a very interesting verse. تَقْتَحِمُونَ, which means that you are recklessly, intentionally, forcefully jumping into the example and a parable. Now, off the bat, it shows the mercy of the Prophet ﷺ and what he really desires to rescue every single human being. But it's amazing how some of us, and many of the people, like those moths, do not care of that person who's trying to protect them. But rather, they may perhaps view this individual as a person who is standing between them and what they desire. Even if in reality what they desire will lead to their destruction. So the Prophet ﷺ is telling us that he is the guard, the boundary. That the rules that he has placed, the regulations, is the boundaries, what prevents us from falling to the hellfire. It's there to protect us. But there are those who do not take heeding, do not want to listen, but are only looking what do they desire. Doesn't matter what the consequences are. And they're crossing these boundaries into falling to their demise and destruction. So essentially it's the disobedience of the Prophet ﷺ and falling into sin, crossing those boundaries is what leads people to the hellfire. And the Prophet ﷺ is trying to rescue us from this. A lot of the times, some of these reasons or some of this behavior is because some might view the boundaries that Allah has placed him and his Messenger ﷺ, because whatever the Prophet ﷺ has ordered is also an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because we know that the Prophet ﷺ does not speak out of his whims and desires. إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَى. Verily, he is only a wahyun yuha. He only talks from revelation. He is the Prophet ﷺ. He receives revelation and he relays it. So whatever the orders in this religion, they are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But yet some view it as restrictive. Restrictive in the negative connotation, of course. Something that is preventing you or coming between you and attaining what you see as pleasurable, as an enjoyment of life. Something that is preventing you from getting a beautiful life. Or something of a source of enjoyment. When in reality it's the opposite. Now I want to tackle this issue of thinking that religion is restrictive in the negative sense. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the reality is the opposite. He said subhanahu wa ta'ala, إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمْ الْعُسْرَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says He intended for you ease and does not intend for you hardship. Because whenever we think of religion as restrictive, we think it's bounding, it's choking, it's a hardship. But Allah is telling us the opposite. These rules and regulations, they're placed for a reason. This entire religion is meant to make your life easy. It is not meant to make your life difficult. So we should not be like that moth that don't see this. But rather it's here to protect us and not make our life harder. But to guide us to what overall will make our life easy in this world and the hereafter. يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرَ. And even the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّ هَذَا الدِّينَ يُسْرٌ. Where this religion is ease. It's easy in its understanding of its creed and beliefs. It's easy in its forms and actions. If it's orders and its prohibition, it is easy. But sometimes we focus on specific things and become very involved in them that we make make our life a bit more difficult. That sometimes we make this religion hard upon ourselves, but in reality it's the opposite. Now, yes, the example of the hadith talks about the moth, but we see this in our daily life. Whenever parents would prevent a child from doing something that would harm them, even if the child screams and yells and cries, we always say that the parent is correct in this matter because the child, if he's allowed to do whatever they desire, they're going to harm themselves. We are no different. When a doctor gives a restrictive form of diet to a patient, or a person who has an allergy, the doctor tells them, do not eat this or get close to this allergen because it will kill you. And then the person says, wait a second, I enjoy this, let me go. What are they doing? They're leading to their own destruction. And so those guidelines are meant to protect us, not the opposite. يريد الله بكم اليسر ولا يريد بكم العسر. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He mentioned these things, and He placed these rules and regulations, it is for a very important purpose. And it is to free us from the shackles and chains of the shaitan that he places us in. To free us from the shackles of our own whims and desires. So whenever we are disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we really are doing the opposite. We are chaining ourselves, we're destroying ourselves, we're not freeing ourselves. Because we are meant to attain higher levels. We are not meant to, as they say, يَخْلُدْ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ, to remain as lowly to this earth. But rather, we are meant to elevate spiritually and higher above everything. This is why the Prophet ﷺ in Sahih Muslim, he said, كُلُّ النَّاسُ يَغْدُو فَبَائِعٌ نَفْسَهُ فَمُعْتِقُهَا أَوْ مُوبِقُهَا. That every one of us in the morning gets up, فَبَائِعٌ نَفْسَهُ, so he sells himself. فَمُعْتِقُهَا أَوْ مُوبِقُهَا. He sells himself, so he either frees it or destroys it. He frees it by selling himself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. By abiding by the orders and rules and regulations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they're meant to protect him and nourish him and guide him. So he frees himself to something that is of a higher entity. You don't allow nothing to control you in this world. Or you can do the opposite, which means that you'll sell yourself to your desires or the shaitan by following your whims and desires. And in doing so, you would chain yourself. You would suffocate yourself and you would destroy yourself. These are usually the only two choices that we have. The Prophet ﷺ had mentioned this. Because in the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, they always mention is always either wahy or hawa. Either revelation or your own whims and desires. We follow either revelation that is meant for us, or we follow our own desires, which could lead to our own destructions. The brothers and sisters in Islam, let's hypothetically entertain the idea that we are allowed, or that the Prophet ﷺ was allowed to decide what is part of the religion based on our whims and desires. What would happen? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers this in two different ways in the Quran. In the first ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this Surah Hujurat, He said, وَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ فِيكُمْ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ لَوْ يُطِيعُكُمْ فِي كَثِيرٍ مِنَ الْأَمْرِ لَعَنِتُّمْ. He said, know that among you is the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. لَوْ يُطِيعُكُمْ وَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ فِيكُمْ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. The Messenger of Allah is among you. If he obeys you, in many of the matters that you are suggesting, what would happen? لَعَنِتُّمْ. You would have faced hardship. Because in the end, those boundaries, whether they're obligations or prohibitions that are placed, they're placed by Allah, who is more knowledgeable than us, who knows what is beneficial for what He has created more than us. قُلْ أَأَنْتُمْ أَعْلَمُ أَمٍ لَا. Say, who's more knowledgeable? You or Allah? So when you're trying to debate and argue, and this is subhanAllah something that is built in us. وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ جَدَلًا. And it's amazing, the human being is the most, argumentative. It is not we're arguing because we want what is right, but rather most of the time we're arguing because we want to follow our own desires. I'm going to sidetrack a little bit, but I'm going to give you some of the simple arguments we find in our modern time about why should we not drink alcohol? Why can't we do drugs? Why do I have to wear the hijab? In fact, sometimes some people go further to try to legitimize all these facts and say, listen, drugs was not mentioned in the Quran, it must be halal. Hijab is not mentioned in the Quran, it must be something cultural. And that is a lie, by the way. It is mentioned in the Quran. They just don't understand the Arabic terms of it. And it's mentioned in the Sunnah, whether they like it or not. Which means what they're going to have to do is they're going to try to nullify the Sunnah. The things that you have to jump to do these things. But even if you're allowed to do all these things and try to legitimize, would it make your life easier? No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says it will make it harder for you. Your life will be miserable because these boundaries are made to protect you. The obligations, you need them to nurture your spirituality. لعنتم. You'll find this difficult for you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, another verse says, لو اتبع الحق أهواءهم لفسدت السماوات والأرض ومن فيهن. If the truth, الحق, whether it's the Quran or the religion, the truth, if it followed their desires, their whims and desires, what would happen? لفسدت السماوات والأرض ومن فيهن. Then this entire earth and the skies and what's in them will be in ruins. It's the nature of human beings, because in the end, whose desire should the religion follow? My desire, your desire, his desire. We all have our own inclinations and thought processes, which means this religion will not be the religion of Islam anymore. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never left it for our own decision. It is completely objective. Allah decides what is right for us. Allah decides what is good for us, because it's based on knowledge and knowing the future. Knowing the consequences of specific actions, whether on ourselves or our family or even the society or the entire world. It's a beautiful example that the Prophet gave in the beginning. And we don't follow these rules, what are we doing? We are destroying ourselves. That is the end of it. Now, it's interesting, I'm going to continue that verse in the Quran because it's very beautiful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَعَلَمُوا أَنَّ فِيكُمْ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ لَا يُطِيعُكُمْ فِي كَثِيرٍ مِنَ الْأَمْرِ لَعَنِتُّمْ. That if Allah Prophet obeyed many of your opinions. One person came to the Prophet and said, give me permission to commit zina. Another person would say, give me permission not to pray. A third, well, I don't want to pay zakah. A fourth, I don't want to fast. It's hard. A third, I don't want to wear the hijab. A fifth, then what happens? لَعَنِتُّمْ, you have hardship. But what is the solution for this? Because sometimes it is very important that we have to realize our emotions through process. We should never detest any rule and regulation from Allah, because Allah is the most just and merciful, and all His rules are associated with those qualities. So we need to know that these rules are more merciful for us than our own mothers. They're more better for us than our own opinion. They're based on the knowledge of Allah, which is more than our knowledge. And so the key for us to accept these rules and regulations and follow them is what? وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ حَبَّبَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْإِيمَانَ وَزَيَّنَهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made beloved to you belief. وَزَيَّنَهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُم, and decorated into your hearts. And so it's by belief and iman in all these aspects and actions of Allah ta'ala will you be able to submit and obey Allah. وَقَرَّهَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْكُفْرَ وَالْفُسُوقَ وَالْعِصْيَانَ, and He made it detested for you, hated for you. Al-kufra, disbelief. Wal-fusuqa, major sins. Wal-isyan, minor sins. Or disobedience and defiance. All the same meaning. But we need to hate this because Allah hates it. And so if we have these characteristics, we'll move away from sinning. We will want to follow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, all this is فَضْلًا مِنَ اللَّهِ وَنِعْمًا. This is a fadl, which means a grace from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَنِعْمًا, and a bounty from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ حَكِيمٌ. This is the attributes of all these things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most knowledgeable and most wise. Dear brothers and sisters in Islam, we do not want to be like the moth that the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned, that we insist and blindly out of ignorance defy the orders and regulations of the Prophet ﷺ and Allah, and by our own hands and decisions jump into the hellfire. But rather it should be the opposite. We should stay within the boundary. The Prophet ﷺ is trying to rescue us by delivering this message clearly, and it is delivered clearly. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is another beautiful meaning that the Mufassirin says, وَعَلَمُوا أَنَّ فِيكُمْ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. Know that among you is the Prophet ﷺ. At the time of the Sahaba, he's physically between them. And for us, after the time of the Sahaba, the Prophet ﷺ is still among us through his teachings, through the sunnah that has been preserved. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be one of the ones who rescue ourselves from the hellfire by following the footsteps of the Prophet ﷺ and obeying Allah and His Messenger. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي. إن الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. I'd like to end this khutbah by mentioning one last interesting hadith the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned in Sahih Bukhari, or the Imam Bukhari had narrated from the Prophet ﷺ, and this is narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. He said, كل أمتي يدخل الجنة إلا من أبى. كل أمتي يدخلون الجنة إلا من أبى. My entire ummah, the Prophet ﷺ said, every single person from my ummah will enter Jannah except the one that refuses. I just want you to think about the statement. The Prophet ﷺ is saying, everyone from his ummah, all of us, each one of us, will enter Jannah except the one that refuses. It's a very interesting statement because obviously who would refuse to enter Jannah? And so like similarly the Sahaba, this is what the reaction. قالوا رسول الله ومن يأبى. This is in the hadith. They said, O Messenger of Allah, who was it that would refuse? What's wrong with this person? Why would he refuse to enter Jannah? So the Prophet ﷺ said, من أطاعني دخل الجنة ومن عصاني فقد أبى. Whomever obeys me will enter Jannah. And whomever disobeys me, then he has refused to enter Jannah. Brothers and sisters in Islam, one thing from this hadith, it tells you that the equation for entering Jannah is simple. It is obviously clear for us. The only thing we need to do is follow those instructions and walk along that straight path. And if we come on, just come back. It's not that difficult. If we fall into sin, ask for forgiveness. The one who seeks repentance after the sin is as if he did not commit a sin. Inna Allah ghafurur rahim. Allah verily is merciful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala extends his hand in the day so that he would forgive the person who sinned at night, and he extends in the hands at night for those who have to forgive those who have sinned in the day. There's no such thing as losing hope. There's no such thing as being pessimistic about it. But rather we should have the best of opinions on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أَنَا عِنْدَ ظَنِّ عَبْدِي بِي. I am as my servant thinks of me. So if he thinks of me well, then it will happen. If he thinks of me bad, then that is what it is. And so we need to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and trust him and believe that he will guide us if we seek it. That he will truly protect us if we try to abide it. And the Prophet ﷺ always gave us instruction. He said, سَدِّدُوا وَقَارِبُوا. He said, aim to get the target. If not, then aim as close as possible. Do the best as you can. Walk that straight line. It has been made clear for us. It's not as if it's evening. The wide road is very clear. And it just has to do with following the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and following the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala based on the understanding of the Messenger of Allah and his companions and the Tabi'een and the great Imams. اللهم اغفر لنا وبينات الأحياء منهم والأموات واغفرنا ورحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم عافنا في الدنيا والآخرة اللهم نسألك العفو والعافية في الدنيا والآخرة اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك لنا فيما أعطيت وقنا برحمتك شر ما قضيت فإنك تقضي ولا يقضى عليك إنه لا يذل من واليت ولا يعز من عاديت تباركت ربنا وتعاليت اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه اللهم نسألك الفردوس الأعلى وما قرب إليه من قول وعمل ونعوذ بك من النار وما قرب إليه من قول وعمل اللهم انصر المسلمين في كل مكان اللهم انصر المسلمين في كل مكان اللهم ارفع البلاء عن هذه الأمة اللهم ألهمنا رشدنا وأعدنا إلى ديننا ردا جميلا طيبا وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وقم إلى صلاة